Hello, everybody, and welcome to my final stream of Hacktoberfest. I am Swift. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Major League Hacking, or MLH, as many of you probably know us. I had a very roundabout journey into open source. We'll hear about that, I'm sure. But as part of DigitalOcean's 12 years now festival around getting people to open source called Hacktoberfest, I wanted to have a series of conversations with leaders, both people building software, maintaining it, contributing, about their journeys into open source, about what it means to be a great open source citizen in this age of AI, about where the future of open software is going. And I couldn't be more excited for today. So, throughout the month, we've heard from a ton of different people, different, walks of contributions or involvements in open source. The person I'm about to bring on the stream in a second here is probably the most prolific open source contributor and maintainer I know. And inevitably, I'll be looking at a project on GitHub or somewhere out in the world, and I'll say, "Wow, this is really cool." Who are the people behind this? And of course, Jordan, who you'll meet in a second, is almost inevitably there in many of them. And we're going to find out why today. So, without further ado, let me bring my friend Jordan Harbrand up on the stream. Jordan, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, I'm genuinely so excited for this conversation. As I just said, I literally see you out in the wild on GitHub constantly, and I cannot wait to share all of the story that we can about your journey and advice for all these contributors out there. Why don't we just start with an introduction, though? Can you give us a little bit of background on yourself and maybe a little background
Yeah,
about your journey into open source?
sure. Let's see. Generally speaking, most of my career I've been a web infrastructure engineer. So I think I started like with my own garage startup with my friends in like 2006. That never really it didn't fail, which is great, but it never really succeeded either. So we like ended up shutting it down in 2015. So it like ran for a while. But then at some point, after the startup ran out of money to pay me and I ran out of room on my credit cards, I had to get a real job. And so I went and started work at Brightkite, which used to be a Foursquare competitor back in 2010. And so I just sort of moved through some cool companies since then. I was at TripIt and Twitter and Airbnb and Opendoor and Coinbase and Hero Devs, and I've done some contracting at Protocol Labs and OpenSSF and the OpenJS Foundation, and so I've kind of been all over the place. I've been participating in TC39, which is the JavaScript Standards Committee, since 2014. It's been 11 years. And I've been on the OpenJS Foundation's Cross-Project Council. I maintain NVM, which is an OpenJS project. And I've been on the OpenJS Foundation board on 2 different occasions, representing an employer that I had to, when I left the employer, I had to step down from the board. And yeah, I started doing open source as part of that. I started consuming it as part of my startup back in the 2000s, but I started participating really with those jobs in 2010, where I was filing issues, and I think my first pull request was to a jQuery infield labels plugin. Before we all realized that that's like a horrific pattern for UX and accessibility. But the site I was working on had them. So, and it just sort of kept going from there. And eventually, like the way I became a maintainer of NVM is that the original creator of it, I guess, liked my issues and or pull requests and was just like, I've been pretty busy. Why don't you do it? And he just sort of handed me the keys, and I didn't even know how any form of shell scripting at the time. And NVM's written in like POSIX, which doesn't even have arrays. It's like very primitive. So I sort of been kind of cautiously bumbling my way through, and I would pick up other JavaScript projects in a similar way, just kind of by being there consistently enough, people were like, why don't just you do the work? And so I guess I didn't learn to say no. Probably still haven't. And then I started creating my own projects along the way. While I was at Airbnb, I ran their open source program for the 4 years I was there. And so ended up taking over maintenance of most of their JavaScript projects. And I'm still the maintainer for a good half of them. the including like the JavaScript style guide and the associated ESLint plugins. One of my teammates created Enzyme, the React testing framework, and I have not had enough time to maintain that for 6+ years, but I'm the only person even around to do so. So yeah, so now I have well over 500 projects that I maintain. On most of them, I'm a single maintainer. Luckily, most of them are kind of small, single-purpose things that are largely like finished and almost never need to be touched again, just to check in on them. So I really like the kind of Unix philosophy of a thing should do one thing and it should do it well, and then you should compose those things to make up bigger things. Because then when you have a problem, or when you're maintaining something, or when you're like using something, the scope that you have to think about is so much smaller, right? Like that's the value and the whole point of abstractions, right? Is that like, I don't have to think about semiconductor electronics. I have a computer, right? Someone else has thought about that for me, and I can learn about that and dive into it if I want to, but I don't have to. And so it's the same sort of thing with like, libraries and whatnot. Is the human society functions best when we all stand on the shoulders of everyone that came before us, which means we shouldn't be solving the same problem more than once if we can avoid it. So I really kind of, that philosophy is really embedded in everything I do with open source and engineering. And like, that's sort of why I end up with, I think, so many packages. But they like, I guess there's lots of reasons that those things are widely used. I would hope that some of it is because they solve the problem well. And, but it's kind of terrifying how like much of NPM I actually support. Like, I think it's like on a given week, it's between 5 and 10% of its download traffic, which is, yeah, like governments world over should be terrified that one individual.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, I can be a bit of user testimony here, right? Like the reason I know how prolific you are is because I use almost all of those open source projects you've already mentioned, and probably many of your other ones too. Like I think actually the first project of yours that I was using was NVM, because I have personal .file scripts where I literally had been writing bash scripts to install Node, and I was dealing with version incompatibility and all this other stuff. And I remember stumbling across NVM and using it and like falling in love with this and telling all these people about it. But it was just like such, to your point, it was just like this utility that we all depended on. And I think about the same thing with a lot of the Airbnb, JavaScript stuff too, that you mentioned, right? Like those are default parts of almost every JavaScript project I start these days. And I think so much of what you have is what I would classify as like open source infrastructure, right? It's more than just like a random utility. It's like, these are libraries we all depend on every day. There's so much I want to ask you about it.
And these things aren't like the things that I maintain, like they're not necessarily the best solution for everyone, right? Like, because there's lots of caveats and stuff. Like my stuff tends to have, like infamously so, like supports very old engines, browsers, and Node and whatnot. Most people may not need that, and so maybe there's something that doesn't have that as a constraint that does the job just as well. Cool. Like NVM, it's not the fastest version manager. There's lots that are much faster, but there's none that I know of that use the same approach where it like changes the path in the current shell. They all use like kind of a shim based approach, which lots of other ecosystems have as well. And that has its trade-offs. There's reasons that works well, and there's reasons that works very poorly. And so like, with all of these things, people are going to have opinions about like where their priority list differs from that of the maintainers, and that's fine. But like, there's a reason I think that certain sets of priorities end up getting a lot of adoption and others don't. And it's not just, like I believe at least that it's not just like momentum, inertia, and legacy. It's like there's other factors, but everyone can also have their own opinion on that.
No. I fully see that, right? Like there's so much to this. And I think, I think a lot about legacy software in general, right? Because, that's been such a major challenge for all of society in engineering for literally the entire time we've been doing this. And there are still systems that were written in like the 70s that were still that millions and millions of people depend on every day, probably older than that too, to be honest, right? Like, but when you're an enterprise use case or you have a really specific set of constraints, like there's only a finite set of things that can solve your problem, and the people who maintain
Yeah.
those are the ones that are enabling you to do it in the first place. You've worked at like such an amazing array of organizations, like all
I've been
those
very
names that you
fortunate.
listed are just like incredible. Yeah, no, it's awesome. Can you talk a little bit about open source in the context of your career journey there? Like, how did it play into you landing those roles? Like, where was contributing to open source like the main thing you were doing as part of them? But like, how does open source weave into your career journey in a practical way?
Yeah. So in the first two jobs, it really wasn't like it helped inform my expertise, I guess, but it wasn't like I just didn't really maintain anything, I think, back then. And like I wasn't participating in standards the way I do. And um, so it was more just part of the job. You interact with it when you need it, when you need to get something done. Which I think, to be fair, I think that's still the majority attitude of open source in the engineering industry, right? Is that like most people don't interact with it at all, and they just, unless they need to solve a problem. But then I started in one of my jobs. I started maintaining the ES5 shim, which was so this was back when ES5 was out and had like array map and for each and stuff. But a lot of people were still on Internet Explorer, like down to 6, and they didn't have those functions. And so like the two approaches you can use is you can either use something like underscore or Lodash, like pull in a library and call that instead of using the native function, or you can use a polyfill, a shim library that basically like tries to spackle in the gaps in the environment to give you as modern as possible an environment. And so I like that company I worked at the time used it, and so I started maintaining it to fix its bugs. And I think that library is part of what made me a more compelling option for the next job I had, which was Twitter. And then when I got there, soon after I got there, some random person who's a friend of mine now reached out to me on Twitter and was like, "Hey, I noticed you've been on these like mailing lists for the standard. Do you want to come to a TC39 meeting?" And so I did, and I loved it. I like was immediately hooked. It's definitely not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but I was like, in that first meeting I was in, I was able to make a material impact. Like, so the like object.assign had some really weird behavior where it would like, if it found an exception, it would just like save it and keep going. And then at the end, it would rethrow just the first exception it had found and throw out any others. It was just bizarre. And so I was able to say, well, for my shim, and I was also able to represent John David Dalton, the Lodash maintainer's position, because at the time he didn't work for an ECMA member. And we were really basically like, this is weird, slow, and impossible to polyfill performantly. And then they fixed it. They like took our advice, and that was like a big dopamine hit. And so like I pretty much immediately returned and scheduled a meeting with the CTO of Twitter and was like, "Hey, we should be contributing here. I can do this. Here's the like relatively paltry amount that Twitter has to pay in so I can do it." And then and they joined, and it was great. And then when I left and went to Airbnb, I was able to kind of make it a condition of hiring me that they would join and send me. And so that's just been how I've ran it ever since. As I've basically told everyone that like I have to be allowed to do this at the very least. And some employers have been more willing to cover my expenses for travel to the in-person meetings, and some have been less. But like, yeah. So that's I think that sort of helped me kind of have a story, a narrative for my career.
Yeah, I mean,
and also I should mention I don't have a college degree, so being able to have my own startup and standards and open source work has massively covered for that, for any gap that might have otherwise caused in the eyes of potential employers.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I think one of the lessons I'm reading between the lines on, and tell me if you agree with this, is that so much of the work you were doing was in public in many ways, and that gave you a lot of credibility and ability to garner the support that you needed in order to be able to go out and do this work for these companies. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it also can. I mean, you can read anything you want from anything, but like, I think it would be an easy argument to make that it can demonstrate initiative and taking ownership, which employers like. It can demonstrate the ability to work with others, especially like a broad range of personalities. Right? It can also demonstrate an inability to work with others, and like, I am sure if I, took an AI and ran it over all of my open source comments over time and did sentiment analysis, like I would hopefully become much less of an asshole moving forward, right? Like, we all learn and grow. Yeah.
That's fair. Did you just naturally have the confidence to be able to go to work and set up this meeting with the CTO of Twitter and be like, hey, we're going to do this and bring with your next job? Like, how did you like it? It seems like a lot of people would even if they were doing what you were doing, might not have the ability to go in and do that, just like in a mental block or whatever. How did you get there?
Yeah, I mean, well, everyone's got a little bits of imposter syndrome to some degree, and then like, so some of it is that um, I sort of I've learned to be an extrovert. I was not one really younger, and so that even things that come naturally to people are also skills and muscles that you can strengthen. And so like, that just now comes naturally to me, but definitely didn't originally. On top of that, I mean, like I said, I don't have a degree, and yet I have still managed to succeed. And the that that instills a lot of confidence. Earned or unearned is relevant, right? It's just, it makes you think that you can get away with stuff whether you can or not. And then on top of that, I mean, I'm a like straight cis white dude in the US who grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, like with the internet. And so I have a lot of context, and, so I have a lot of like privilege from that, somebody without some of those things might just be less confident. Right. So, I'm not trying to pretend like it's all me, but I would say that, that made it easier for me to do these things. I think that it would be great if they, like, you can't just say, well, you should just be confident. That I know that doesn't work from experience, right? But like, you can pull off a lot in life by being confident and well-intentioned and genuine and and doing it with integrity, including overplaying your hand, right? So if you go into a job and you're confident you can actually do the job and deserve your paycheck, does it really matter if you knew how to do it before you got there or not? Like, and as long as you can accept that and decide that that's genuine, that's honest for yourself, sell it, go do it.
Yeah. Yeah. My word of the year has been belonging, right? It's that belief that I belong in a room, with other people. And that's such a powerful effect. It's like, similar to you, I'm actually a deeply introverted person. Like, being extroverted is something that I've had to teach myself to do, or come off as extroverted is maybe what we'll call that instead. But to your point, it's a muscle, right? And it's like something that if I work it, it does change. And believing that I belong in the room with other people is what gives me the ability to stick my hand up and say, be bold and suggest things in the vein of like what you're talking about here. So I really get it, and I think it's not an easy thing to do, but it's very impressive that you've been able to get there.
The other thing I would say is that I think there's some quote. It's like, excellence is it's something about it's a thing it's a thing that you repeatedly do. And so it, like, I'm mangling the quote, but the idea is like, I have learned as well through personal experience that if you act a certain way consistently enough, it will become part of your character. If you decide you want to be polite and you're not naturally polite, like saying please and thank you and holding doors and stuff, and you just make yourself do that, eventually you won't have to make yourself do that anymore. And the same is true about confidence. The same is true about kindness and compassion. Like, decide who you want to be and just pretend to be that person. Like, method act that, like, rigorously and consistently enough, and you'll become that person. Like that, I think I'm convinced that that's the case.
I knew that you and I would have a great conversation no matter what, but so much of this advice is the exact same advice I would give to people too. So we're on the same wavelength there, Jordan. That's great.
Awesome.
So if I remember, you said the number correctly. You said you maintain something like 500 projects out there.
Yeah, well over that.
Oh my gosh.
I can pull it up right now and let's see. So it says 550 on NPM, but at least 30 of those I don't maintain. I'm just like a emergency bus factor fallback on. So over 500.
Okay. What is that like? How the heck do you maintain 500? Because you've been doing this even before the age of. I want to get to AI in a second here and talk about that too. But
Yeah.
like, you have been doing this since even before the age of AI. So how on earth do you have time for that? How do you do it? Like, walk us through this experience.
So part of it is I mentioned already, right, that a lot of these things are small single purpose utilities that don't require ongoing work. So once they're made, I pop in, like I surf through my repos every couple months, and I'm like, oh, I'll update dependencies, make sure the tests are still passing, or I'll use Dependabot or Renovate, or used to use Greenkeeper, right, stuff like that to do the same thing. I have to pay a lot of attention to my GitHub notifications. I have that tab open on like every device that I own. And I'm pretty good at triaging through those quickly, like being able to like see from the title, I can ignore that, and then, read go through the ones quickly that I can, and then I mark it as unread and come back to it later if I need to page it in more, stuff like that. But I think the other thing is, I mean, I have kids now, but my oldest kid is 8. So the first, 6-7 years of this, I was childless, and as busy as I might have thought I was, I had so much free time back then. But like, also, I used to play video games a lot. My Xbox Live Gamer score is still higher than most people I know, and I haven't like earned a point on that in a decade. And so I've sort of like migrated to doing open source in my free time. It's like fun for me, and it's sort of, it's almost meditative, right? Like I do a few minutes a day minimum, even when I'm on vacation. I've managed to. My work-life balance is such that it doesn't disrupt my life, but it's part of my life. And so like, I have a code commit on the day that I got married. I was alone in my hotel room waiting for the groomsmen to show up. Like, why not? I have one on, the days both of my children were born. Like, there's a lot of downtime and when you're waiting for, contractions and stuff. So it's like, it was a way to keep myself calm and keep myself centered. And like, it's just like I said earlier, it's a habit, right? I do it every day for long enough, and I don't have to try to do it every day anymore.
Yeah, it's like that. What do they say? If you do something you love and you never work a day in your life type situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, that makes so much sense. But how has that changed in the context of AI, if at all, right? Like, are you using any of these tools now to like give you additional leverage or reach?
I mean, a little bit. Like I'm very familiar with most of the tools, or at least around coding. I've used them all. I have subscriptions to a few of them. Like my sort of, I would say my take on AI has become more nuanced than it used to be. I used to be much more skeptical because the quality was much worse. But what I would say is like generative AI in particular, it's amazing for tasks where correctness doesn't matter. I asked it to make up a story to tell my kids, and it just said it out loud. Beautiful, perfect. Doesn't matter if it's correct, right? And it's for things where you're a domain expert, so you know how to evaluate its responses, how to interrogate it and prompt back and forth. Like it can be incredibly useful. For everything in the middle, which is like 90% of the things it's used for, it can be very dangerous. It's very convincing. It's persuasive. It's like seductive to use what it's doing, but it's like often wrong. I remember, I haven't tried this recently, but like I remember for the first couple of years, I would ask ChatGPT or whatever to write a Wikipedia article about me. And it would very confidently tell me about all the things in my life that I definitely didn't do. And there's lots of things like that. And even when I'm using like Claude Code on the command line, which I think is the one I like the best right now for programming, but it's, I have to tell it, like I'll tell it, hey, do this and don't do this. And then like 1 or 2 prompts later, I'll have to say, you just did the thing I said not to do. Like, I think it's better than it used to be as well. But the first time I used it, I told it, make this work without changing the test fixtures. And it immediately changed the test fixtures, like pulled a Volkswagen or whatever. And I was just, it's very frustrating. But at least I know enough to understand that it did it wrong. And so there's nothing wrong with me using it there. Luckily, I haven't been plagued with like much AI slop in terms of issues, comments, and pull requests. There's been some, but it's no worse than like, there's a couple like educational YouTube videos. There's like that happen to be from India, but that's where they as part of teaching the students how to use GitHub, they like make a pull request and they picked an arbitrary project. So like one of them is one of the ones I maintain. And so it's gotten so bad on that project that I actually have a label just for spam from the guy that made that video, because like his students just keep, and they say it's just for testing. And I'm like, nope, it's spam. Like, so it's, that has nothing to do with AI. That's just human behavior. So, I think, I'm still nervous about the legal repercussions of accepting AI-based contributions, because it's not nothing AI produces is copyrightable. And it probably has misused copyrighted content, including my own, right? Because all of my public stuff is in the training data sets. So it's something I'm aware of, but it hasn't like really affected my day to day. Sometimes it's helped, like in the ways I've described, but it hasn't really hurt much. I think AI is not going to, the only way AI is going to take people's jobs is because business people think AI will take people's jobs. And so they do layoffs or less hiring. Like, I think the engineering jobs are going to be around for a long time, even if they're, they shift a little bit. They shifted when GitHub came out, right? Like when open source became popular, they'll shift again. That's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I have been on a bit of a speaking tour for the last year or so, but I honestly believe that this is the greatest time in history to become a software creator. I mean, this is a major paradigm shift where we're basically giving so many people in the world a superpower, but the domain expertise that, software engineers or technologists, have right now is going to give them such a huge edge in learning how to use these tools effectively. But you do need that domain expertise. And I think that's the key thing I'm hearing from you, is that, the places they've been most valuable have been places where either correctness doesn't matter, and so it's about speed and whatever, or it's a place where you have that domain expertise and can work in partnership with the tool. And like, I think that's truly
well, and that's not a new thing. You're not capable of writing good TypeScript unless you can write good JavaScript, period. I don't like anyone who says different. I will happily review your code, but and make you cry. But like, but if you know how to write good JavaScript, then TypeScript provides a lot of help, right? To Flow or TypeScript or whatever, right? It's but you still need the baseline. And again, I'm a huge believer in abstractions. You shouldn't need to know what's under the hood. You don't need to know C in order to program JavaScript, right? But like, but when there's just a lot of cases in life where the baseline domain expertise is pretty important to being able to have quality in what you do. You can write half decent TypeScript without knowing JavaScript, of course, but like, it won't be great code,
Yes, of course. Well, I can't believe we're almost out of time, but I do have two last questions for you that I wanted to talk about. The first one is, this is Hacktoberfest. Like 150,000 people are literally getting their start in open source this month. What advice do you have both for those contributors and for the maintainers who are going to be supporting this new generation of open source citizens?
Check anything in CI that you can check, because it's always nicer to have a robot tell you screwed up than a human. Write a contributing.md, and I've failed to do this too often still, right? But have contributing guidelines. Write really good tests, like no matter what English phrases you write in your documentation, what it does is your API. So use tests to make sure that it does, like that's your API. Be kind. It's okay to like be terse with someone that's wasting your time, but you don't need to be rude. And more importantly, like I said earlier, if you're rude, if you have a habit of being rude, you're going to be a rude person when you shouldn't be. Even though there's sometimes it's fine. Who cares if you're rude to some random spammer? But like, it's not a good personal habit. So yeah, like rigor, documentation, kindness. I think those are the big ones.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And the last thing I wanted to ask you about is like, okay, you've got all these projects. There's literally no way that your employers are paying for you to work on every one of them. You're just doing this out of the goodwill of your heart? Like, is there a way you're being supported? Is there a way people can support you? Like, how does this all work?
Yeah. I mean, there was a time when it was only in like fueling my personal knowledge, and maybe I could use it for career credibility, right? And it still provides that. So it's not completely for nothing, but the with the advent of funding options like GitHub sponsors, Tidelift, Open Collective, Thanks.dev, right? Like there is potential for meaningful income coming from those. Unfortunately, even with the crazy reach that I have, it's not enough for me to not need a full-time job. But it definitely helps, and it also helps. It doesn't just help me justify the time; it helps me justify it to my family. Being able to tell my spouse that like I'm being paid for the like something for this time I'm spending makes it not tense in our household. It's like, okay, cool. You're not just screwing around. And then I would say that it's great when individuals support me, and I love that. But and it makes me feel warm and fuzzy, even if it's only like $1. But the best impact that I think anyone listening can have is convince your employer to put money, like hold cold hard cash, or I guess bodies, right? Like give explicit roadmap time for open source contributions to employees. Like the combination of those two things is, I think, the only non-regulatory path to open source being sustainable. And regulatory paths are, we have bigger problems to worry about in the world's legal landscape.
Well, Jordan, I think we should be doing everything in our power to get even more people to support the work you're doing. Obviously, you're maintaining a huge chunk of the software that we all depend on every single day. Honestly, Major League Hacking should be supporting you. I'm going to talk to our engineering team after this and make sure that we were in that monthly list for sure. But listen, dude, you are doing some amazing work out there. I'm really proud of the fact that I've been able to use your code and we were able to get you on stream, talk a little bit about it today. But Jordan, thank you so much for the time, man. I know you're really busy and you obviously got a lot on your plate, but this was awesome.
All right. Thanks very much.
Of course. All right, everybody. Well, that concludes our last stream as part of Hacktoberfest. I am so proud to be able to have all of these conversations. If you missed the streams, don't worry. We will be cutting them up and publishing them as YouTube or Instagram shorts or reels. There's a lot of great information that came out of them, a lot of great tips for contributors, maintainers, and everybody in between. And so, as part of Major League Hacking, we're so proud to have been part of Hacktoberfest this year. We believe in the power of open source, the power of learning by doing, and this is an event that literally mobilizes so many people to get into this critical infrastructure that we all depend on every day. I'm Swift. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Major League Hacking, and it is a privilege to serve this community and a privilege to be able to have conversations with folks like Jordan. So thank you, everybody, and happy Hacktoberfest and happy hacking.